There is something happening around you right now. In how women pause when you enter a room, in how a conversation shifts when you stop trying, and you are almost certainly misreading it. Most men your age were never taught to see this. Not because they lack intelligence, and not because they lack experience, but because everything you were ever shown about attraction was designed for a younger version of you. A version that no longer exists, and honestly, a version that was never your strongest self to begin with. Here is what nobody tells men over 60. The thing that makes women genuinely drawn to you right now is not something you need to build. It is not something you lost. It is something you already carry. Something that took decades to develop. And the cruelest irony is that most men your age dissolve it the moment it starts to work. I'm going to show you exactly what that quality is. I am going to show you what it looks like, why female psychology responds to it so deeply, and, most importantly, what specific things you are probably doing right now that are quietly erasing it. By the end of this video, you will not just understand it. You will be able to see it operating in your own life, in real time. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Nobody told you the rules changed. And because nobody told you, you have been playing the wrong game, and wondering why it is not working the way it used to. This is where it begins. Because before we can talk about what women respond to in men over 60, we need to be honest about something most men in this age group find uncomfortable. The version of attractive you were operating from, the one that worked at 35, the one built around energy, ambition, forward momentum, and a certain kind of restless drive, that version has a shelf life. Not because those qualities are bad, but because female psychology shifts profoundly. And the qualities that make a woman stop and take notice at 28 are genuinely different from the qualities that pull her attention at 45 or 55. Behavioral researchers who study attraction across the lifespan have consistently found that women's criteria for what feels compelling in a man changes more dramatically with age than men typically expect. What reads as attractive in younger years is often legibility. He wants something, he is going after it, his intentions are visible. Older women, women who have lived through enough relationships to know the difference between chemistry and depth, are not looking for legibility. They are looking for something quieter. You might be thinking, does this mean older men are simply at a disadvantage? Does it mean the window has closed? And the answer, genuinely, is the opposite. Because what women are looking for after a certain age is something most men under 40 simply do not have yet. It takes time to develop. It takes decades of actual living. And you have had those decades. The question is whether you understand what you built. That is the shift most men over 60 never get told about. Here is the problem, though. You cannot use what you do not recognize. And most men in this age group, intelligent, experienced men with real depth, do not have language for what they have become. So we are going to name it. And naming it is going to change how you carry yourself. Women rarely say, "I'm attracted to his self-possession." What they say is, "There's something about him I can't quite explain." That inability to explain it is part of why it works. Self-possession is the quality of a man who does not need the room to confirm him. It is not arrogance. Arrogance is actually the opposite, because arrogance requires an audience to exist. Self-possession is quieter than that. It is the specific quality of a man who has arrived somewhere internally, and is no longer scanning his environment for permission to feel settled. In observable terms, it looks like this. It is the man who holds a moment of silence in conversation without rushing to fill it. Not because he is withdrawn, but because he is comfortable enough to let the silence breathe. It is the man who disagrees with something said at dinner without leaning forward or raising his voice. Who simply says, "I see it differently," and says it once. It is the man who mentions a plan he has, a direction he is moving in, a thing he cares about, and who does not wait to see whether she approves of it before deciding how he feels about it himself. Now, of course, context matters here. Self-possession is not the same as detachment. A man who is simply disengaged, distracted, or emotionally unavailable can look similar from the outside, but feels completely different to a woman who is paying attention. The difference is in what sits beneath the stillness. Detachment is empty. Self-possession is full. Women who have lived enough years can feel that distinction almost immediately, even when they cannot articulate how. What most men miss when they try to be less eager is that they are performing restraint, and performance is always detectable. Real self-possession is not performed. It does not require effort in the moment, because it is the result of accumulated years of actually becoming someone. You already did that work. The question is whether you let it show. The moment you feel her interest, that is the moment most men make the mistake. Not before. Right then. When it matters most. Something happens neurologically the moment a man senses attraction from a woman he is interested in. The brain registers social reward and immediately begins optimizing for more of it. And that optimization feels completely natural. It feels like responsiveness, like warmth, like investment. But from the outside, from where she is standing, it reads as something else entirely. Think back to a conversation that once seemed ordinary, one where you walked away without fully understanding what had just shifted. If you were suddenly more available, if you started over-explaining your thinking, if you began checking her reactions more carefully before completing a thought, if plans that had existed before she entered the picture quietly rearranged themselves around her schedule, you were not being strategic. You were doing what felt natural. But what she experienced was a man who had just handed her the full weight of his emotional equilibrium. And here is the painful truth about female psychology. When a woman who is drawn to your settledness suddenly watches that settledness dissolve at the first sign of her interest, she does not feel flattered. She feels the loss of the thing that drew her in. The door she was curious about has swung open too fast, and something she cannot fully name, some quiet instinct, tells her to take a step back. Most men at this point interpret her stepping back as disinterest and accelerate the pursuit, which accelerates exactly the wrong dynamic. This is not about game playing. It is about understanding that female psychology, particularly in women who have had significant life experience, is not looking for a man whose world reorganizes itself around her arrival. It is looking for a man whose world was already full when she arrived, and who is simply making room for one more good thing. So what does a man who holds that quality steady actually do differently? Because this is where the conversation has to become concrete, or it becomes useless. There are 3 behaviors, specific, observable, learnable, that characterize men over 60 who sustain the quality women find irresistible. Not 3 tricks, 3 patterns rooted in something real. The first is that his life continues visibly. This means that when interest appears between him and a woman, his existing plans, commitments, friendships, and rhythms do not quietly dissolve to create space for her. She becomes aware, not through coldness, not through calculated distance, but through simple naturalness, that his life was already built and running before she arrived. He mentions the dinner he already has Thursday. He keeps the trip he had already planned. He is glad she is interested. He is also glad his life exists. Both things are true simultaneously, and neither one diminishes the other. The second is that he expresses interest without needing a specific response to remain stable. He can say what he thinks, once, clearly, and not loop back to manage how she received it. He does not send the follow-up text that restates the first text. He does not gently revisit a sentiment she did not acknowledge to see if it lands better the second time. He said the thing. He meant it, and now he is at peace, whether or not the response was what he hoped for. The third, and this one is subtle, is that he holds his own perspective in conversation. When she expresses a view, he engages with it genuinely. He does not automatically align himself with her position to create harmony. He does not smooth every rough edge of disagreement to keep the interaction frictionless. Paradoxically, the man who stays rooted in his own thinking while remaining genuinely curious about hers creates more real intimacy than the man who bends toward her to create peace. She can feel when a man's agreement is real. She can also feel when it is performed to manage her. And performed agreement, even when it looks like warmth, registers to female intuition as something closer to weakness. Now, those three behaviors are the visible structure. They are real and they matter. But there is one more layer. And this is the one almost no video about older men and attraction ever addresses. I have been holding this one back deliberately because it only makes sense once you understand everything that came before it. There is one thing women over 45 notice in the first 30 minutes with a man, and almost no one talks about it because it doesn't look like attraction. It looks like peace. The most overlooked signal, the one that separates men over 60 who draw consistent, genuine female attention from those who do not, is a man's relationship with his own history, specifically how he holds his past. Women who have lived through their own significant experiences, marriages, losses, children, careers, reinventions, are finely tuned to a particular frequency in men. They notice whether a man is at peace with the person his life has made him. Not proud in a way that needs to be witnessed. Not performed wisdom that requires an audience. Actually at peace. There is a difference, and it is felt rather than heard. What this looks like in practice is quiet but unmistakable. It is the man who mentions something from his past. A marriage that ended. A career that pivoted. A path not taken. Without bitterness wrapped in the words. And without the faint performance of moving on that is itself a form of bitterness. It is the man who does not need to edit his history for her. Does not emphasize the parts that make him look good, and minimize the parts that make him look complicated. His story is his story. He is not embarrassed by it or proud of it in the way that requires management. He simply has it. The way a man has a coat that fits. Not the coat he wished he had, but the one that actually belongs to him. Psychologists who study attachment and identity coherence in adult men note something they call narrative integration. The capacity of a person to hold the contradictions of their life as a single coherent story, rather than as a collection of events that need to be explained, justified, or revised. Men who have achieved this, and many men over 60 have without realizing it, carry something that women find almost viscerally stabilizing. It signals that this man has processed his experience. He is not storing unresolved material that will surface later as volatility, withdrawal, or need. Here is the part most explanations miss. This quality works at a level women cannot always articulate. She does not think, sitting across from him at dinner, this man has achieved narrative integration. What she thinks is something much simpler. Something like, he seems like a person who has actually lived, and he is all right with it. And that simplicity is the thing that reaches her. Because it is rarer than it should be. You might be wondering, what if I have not fully made peace with parts of my history? And that is an honest question, and it deserves an honest answer. Peace does not mean everything was resolved. It does not mean every chapter ended well or every decision looks correct in hindsight. It means you are no longer in an argument with the life you actually lived. That is a different standard, and it is reachable. The men over 60 who waste this quality are the ones who perform either pride or regret, both of which are forms of not being done with the past. The men who sustain it are the ones who have simply put the argument down. That is the signal she is reading. That is what she means when she says she cannot explain what it is about him. Everything in this video has been pointing toward one overarching truth. Not a technique, not a script. A truth about what kind of man becomes genuinely compelling at this stage of life. Not despite his age, but because of it. And specifically because of what his age represents if he has carried it honestly. You now understand that female psychology in mature women is not looking for energy. It is looking for settledness. Not performed calm, but the real kind that comes from a man who has stopped needing external confirmation to feel solid. You understand that the moment most men dissolve this quality is exactly the moment it matters most, when interest first appears. You understand what self-possession looks like in actual behavior, not theory. And you now know the deepest layer, that a man who carries his own history without argument is carrying something rare enough that women feel it before they understand it. Here is what I want you to take with you. You do not need to perform any of this if you have lived honestly, if you have moved through real things, made real choices, and survived real difficulty. Then the material is already there. Your job is not to build something new. Your job is to stop dismantling what you have already built the moment someone interesting enters the room. That is a different kind of work, and it starts with recognition. I want to ask you something. When did you first notice that the things that used to work stopped working, and what did you do about it? Tell me in the comments. I read them. If this kind of content reaches you, the kind that explains female behavior in plain language, from the inside, without the noise, this channel was made for exactly where you are in life. Most content about attraction was not built with men over 50 in mind. This one is. If that matters to you, stay close. In the next video, I am going to show you something that surprises most men. Women over a certain age test older men very differently than younger men. And the wrong response does not just end things, it closes the door permanently. That one is worth staying for.